Hey guys. Um, well, it is Wednesday and we have another victim impact statement day. Today, of course, was the sentencing hearing for Brian Kohberger in the death of the four Idaho State students in 2022. Um, so it was hard, y'all. I came outside to do this one. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay out here or not. Because I'm getting attacked by mosquitoes. Where I live, we have mosquitoes. But I want to come outside and do this one. But I mean, I thought I was going to be able to get up this morning and get ready and all that kind of thing. Um, And my little 14-year-old turned 14 yesterday. He decided to come in there with me and get in the bed with me first thing this morning. So I kind of had to, uh, I ended up watching the trial. He got in the bed with me and went back to sleep. And so I didn't want to wake him up. So I watched the hearing while he slept beside me and just decided that I just wouldn't worry about it. So I'm just out here now. That's one of my big oak tree. Now that's the pecan tree. No, that's the oak tree. Oak tree's over 100 years old. Way, way up there. Um, okay. So let's get down to business on this Kohberger stuff. You know, the victim impact statement. The first to do their impact statements were the two roommates that survived. Um, it's been horrible for them. Um, you know, Brian Kohberger's defense team tried to tear their, information from their interviews apart and said that they were drunk and they couldn't hear. I mean, these young ladies were subjected to just horrible things. And the first one that we had was it was the impact statement from Bethany Funk, and she wasn't there to read it in person, but she had a friend read it for her. Um, and I'm not going to read these, verbatim. I'm just going to, touch on the, you know, basically, she describes this night as her worst nightmare. Um, she woke up that morning, the morning that her friends were found, with a terrible toothache. She called her dad, who's a dentist, and he told her to take some Advil. So she did, and she went back to bed. There's been the long question forever of why did they wait so long to dial 911? Well, there's your reason. She totally thought that her friends were probably came in after having a night of drinking and, were just acting crazy upstairs or something. She in no way thought that what had happened. And when she woke up that morning, in her mind, everybody was safe and sound in their beds. And she woke up with a toothache and called her dad, who's a dentist, and he got her to take some Advil, and she fell back asleep. So that answers one of the large questions of why was there such a long gap, when the 911 call was made. Um, However, when she did get up and they realized the situation, um, After making the 911 phone call, she remembers nothing. Um, she further stated that due to the situation and the whole 911 call thing, she had been attacked in public. Her family have been flooded with death threats. Um, People have harassed her family endlessly. She literally had been chased by media. And, she said that every day that she wakes up, that she deals with the same thought of, why me? Why did I survive and they didn't? She said that she literally is sick with guilt. She lives with it every day. Um, for a long while, until they caught him, she was terrified. Every moment of her life, she was terrified because she thought that he was going to be coming after her because she survived. And so she didn't know who he was, what he looked like, anything like that. So she literally had to live her life until they picked him up, terrified that he was coming for her next. Um, Her mother had to close the blinds, all the blinds in their house, because the media would literally camp out outside their home. And if the blinds were open, they would be that intrusive. Um, she actually, for a whole year, had to sleep with her parents with the bedroom door locked with a double lock. Um, but even with all that now, she's realized, that there was nothing that she could have done about that. And she has, made it her, the main focus of her life is to live for them. And, she refuses to take anything for granted anymore. Um, so, yep, that was, I thought we were going to, Dylan was supposed to make a statement, I believe. And let me see. Let me check my notes. It was 3 hours long, y'all. Oh, Dylan did. Okay. Another thing um, that she talked about was how all of them were in the Sigma Chi sorority, and they were just happy to be together, living there in that house. She said that Xana was a one in a million, life of the party. She was kind and funny, made everyone feel loved, and just was a light every time she went into a room. She described Kaylee as just having a radiant smile, funny, kind, just, the same. Um, Ethan said that he was just the sweetest, genuine guy, easy to talk to, you know, just said that he and Vanna were soulmates. Um, just great, great people. Maddie, she referred to as her older sister. Said that she was a ray of sunshine, kind, funny, wanted the best for everyone. Always made her feel safe and included. And she actually talked about how Maddie had chosen her as her sorority little, because Maddie had actually finished her studies. And so she had chosen her as her sorority little. And she described how, like, just one night, for instance, they choreographed a little dance routine for Halloween. And she just said that, if anything, she just wished that she could hug them for one last time and that she's always going to live for them. The next that we had up was Dylan Morrison. And she stayed seated in a chair for her testimony. I mean, for her, I'm sorry, impact statement. And she made her statement herself. Um, basically, she said that everything in her life has changed because of him. Um, basically, she said that four genuine, compassionate people were taken for no reason. Um, and in talking about that, not only did he take away those people, but he took away, future birthdays, graduations, celebrations, um, and any other memories that they were supposed to be making together. Stated that he had taken away her ability to trust. Um, at 19, I mean, she had just turned 19 when this happened, and so it kind of forced her to her entire life changed at the age of 19. Again, another one, she said that she had to sleep in the room with her mother. Anytime she did go places, that she made escape plans, how she was going to get out if something happened. She talked about the debilitating panic attacks. Um, how it was, the shaking, and that her body would just drop to the floor screaming because she literally realized that she was reliving everything over and over again. Um, and, most of all, it's forced her to live in what she calls this new version of her life. Um, And as describing, she described Brian Kohberger as just being a hollow vessel, less than human, um, feels nothing, no remorse. Uh, but, she also said that he will never take her voice, her memories, that they are sacred to her, and he will never take them. Uh, I mean, these girls were just so absolutely just I mean, it is these girls. I feel so horribly for them. The first family to speak, they basically called the families up to speak in order of the names were as they were on the indictment. So the first family to speak was Maddie Logan's family. Now, I'm not going to go as deep into detail with the family statements. Maybe hit some of the high spots. I'm going to tell you who spoke, their relationship to him. Basically, because this is one that, you know, if you missed it, there are going to be plenty of streams that, live streamed it, and you can go back and watch it. And you definitely need to, because my words and the way that my voice just cannot convey the feelings that these family members and friends had in their voices. So I decided with the family members that I'm going to kind of tell you who made statements, their relation, and maybe some high points. Some of them they will have, some of them won't. But Maddie Logan's family, she was the first family to speak, and the first person to give a statement was Scott Laramie. Now, Scott Laramie is Maddie's stepfather. He had been Maddie's stepfather since she was 2.5 years old. So, literally, you know, Maddie was not only his only child, Maddie was also her mother's only child. So, they raised Maddie together. Um, and then after, Scott, like I said, very heart wrenching testimony. After that, we had, let's see, a victim's advocate uh, gave uh, Karen Laramie, which is Maddie's mother, Victims advocate gave her statement. After that, we had Kim Sheely, and Kim is the paternal grandmother to Maddie's biological father, Ben. She talked about how Maddie was her first grandchild, and she talked about how, with Maddie being the first grandchild, that's when, when you become grandparents, um, that's, your first grandchild, that's usually how when you figure out what you're going to be called as a grandparent. And she had decided that she wanted to be called Nana. So she said that she talked about a specific event where they were going to Oregon to visit Maddie. And at that time, her parents were together, Karen and Ben. And Maddie hadn't really started talking a lot yet. And Maddie called bananas badiddle diddles. And I thought that was just so precious. Badiddle diddles. And so when they went to visit her, uh, you know, her grandmother said she kept trying to tell her to, call her Nana. And that Maddie started calling her diddle diddle because she called bananas badiddle diddles. So her grandmother became diddle diddle, which later on in life was just shortened to diddle. So, you know, Maddie called her diddle as her little nickname. Um, and she talked about how Maddie's two aunts, her biological father's two sisters, they had actually come up with a Maddie May Day. Everybody calls her Maddie May. Um, it's Maddie May Day, and it is on her birthday, which is May the 25th. And basically, on Maddie May Day, they just want everyone to, do whatever you can do to do something kind for someone. If you can do more than one, great, but at least, make it a point to show a random act of kindness. Um, Next up was Ben Logan, which is Maddie's biological father. And again, he spoke about how, she was his only child as well. He spoke about his life, when when her mom and him separated. He had some addiction issues, and so he had some battles that he was fighting, but he said, he talked about how strong Maddie was, and that even though he wasn't able to be with Maddie as much as he would have liked to have been because of those addiction issues, he just was so grateful to Scott for for helping raise Maddie, and that little family was uh, just heartbreaking. But he did talk about how, once Maddie got older, that, Maddie would call him to check on him and things of that nature. And, hey, what you doing? He said one thing that they did start doing together when she got older was going to concerts together. And I can understand that. I'm a music lover myself. I love going to listening to live music. And he had said that one of the last things that he remembers and just remembered it with joy was how Mac Miller was her favorite artist. Now Mac Miller himself is deceased now. Um, and the Mac Miller concert happened to be sold out. But the day of the concert, one of the radio stations, as radio stations do, they had a little contest, and you could call in and win 4 meet and greet Mac Miller tickets. And he decided that he was going to win those tickets, and he did. He won Maddie her 4 meet and greet tickets to the Mac Miller concert, and she was able to go to that. And then he had his last Father's Day card that Maddie had sent to him, and he read what Maddie had written in his card. and it was just really heartbreaking. He, talked about how, Maddie was already through with her education. She just had not gone to her graduation ceremony had not happened yet. That was coming up, and he talked about how he and Scott and Karen had to go to the university together alone, without Maddie, to get her diploma that she had earned, and that was just really, really sad. These young people had so much. They were doing everything right. They were being young adults, just like they were supposed to, and it's just awful. Um, the next family that had victim impact statements was Kaylee Gonzalez's family, and of course, first up was her father, Steve. And Steve was going to be sure that Brian Kohberger knew, hey, I'm talking to you, bud. And he did that by way of, in some courts, victim impact statements, sometimes you can't, you're not facing the the perpetrator. You're facing the judge. And then in some states, you actually get up on the stand and you're looking dead eyed with them. In this courtroom, the way that they had it set up, the podium was set up to oh, there goes an man, to be facing the judge, and it had a big sign on it that says "Do not move." But Steve Gonzalez, he got up there, and the first thing that he did was he picked up that podium, turned it 90 degrees so that he was looking directly into the eyes of Brian Kohberger. And basically, it was a very, I mean, he made his victim impact statement was powerful. Um, Basically told him, he said, you picked the wrong family. Um, you know, tried to, I'm sorry, I'm swatting flies now. Okay. And told him how, you picked the wrong family to mess with. You thought that you could just do what you were going to do, and that we were going to be silent. Not only did you pick the wrong family, you picked the wrong family, you picked the wrong community, you picked the wrong state because, you thought that you were, uh, going to get away with all of this. And no. And, this whole world, knew about this case. And he talked about how all the families are united now. And I mean, he just, like I said, I want you guys to go watch because I can't do them justice. I just can't. But it was, he spoke directly to Kohberger and he meant business. The next person in Kaylee's family was Olivia, and that is her older sister. And in the same way that her father got up there and, made sure that Kohberger knew that he meant business, her sister Olivia did the same. Um, she started her, and I'm just, like I said, hers is definitely one that you need to go watch for yourself. She started it out with, how about how she just, when this happened, um, right after the police officers had left, from telling them that their, daughter or sister and everything was deceased, and they looked at their dad and they said, "Dad, what do we do now?" And their dad said, "You go to work. You go to work." And that's what they did. That's how they handled this. And they were talking about how within, I think, an hour, they already had, the Gonzalez family already had the videotape with Brian Kohberger's car on it. Um, and she went on to talk, you were doing, I mean, she let him know that, you might think that you're smarter than everybody, but I'm here to tell you, no, not only are you not smarter than anybody, you're pretty dumb. And she kind of closed out. She said, she told him at the beginning too, she said, you know, I'm not going to stand up here and cry. I refuse to share my good memories of my sister with you. Those are my memories. Um, and she said, I'm not going to feed your beast. Um, and at the end of her statement, she said, I'm going to call you for what you are, sociopath, psychopath, and murderer. The next to speak for Kaylee's family was Krista, her mother. And of course, she, bless her heart, she's a Gonzalez, and she both Olivia and Krista left that podium facing Brian Kohberger, so they were speaking right to him, and you know, again, just heartbreaking mother's, impact statement. Um, the next person to speak was Aubrey. No, yeah, Aubrey, and that was the youngest daughter of the Gonzalez family. Um, and that's even worse. When you have even younger siblings that they don't have any. Like you had Olivia, the older sister. She talked about how because uh, Kaylee and Maddie were best friends and had been best friends for so long. And she talked about how Kaylee and Maddie both, she looked at both of them as her little sisters. And she said they knew that if they couldn't handle something, they could bring it to me and Big Sister would take care of it. And that's how she kind of went about her victim impact statement. I'm Big Sister and I'm taking care of business. And boy, she did. Aubrey, the younger sister, she made a statement. Then Shannon Gray, which is the Gonzalez attorney, he made a statement for her grandmother, Tammy Buck, her aunt, Linda Lukens, and her other grandmother, Cheryl Gonzalez. Um, at that point in time, that was the end of the statements for the Gonzalez family. So court recessed for it was supposed to be 10 minutes, but took a little bit longer than that, and I can totally understand why. Because these were emotional, powerful statements. Um, after Steve's, no, it was after Olivia's impact statement. The courtroom erupted with people clapping. I think, well, it was Steve's too. Steve's, Olivia's, Aubrey's, and uh, Shannon Gray when he gave the statements for both grandmothers and her aunt. Um, all of them had clapping. The courtroom erupted with people laughing. Clapping, which a lot of the times, judges don't allow that. They don't want you to do that. Judge Hippler did not care. He did not mind because these people weren't only addressing the the person that took the life of their family member, but also in this case, another person that was just like family. The next family that came up for the impact statements was Xana Kernodles. The first person to make their statement for her family was Jasmine Kernodle, and that was her older sister. And she, very much described Xana as being, her best friend. Um, and not just because she was her sister, she was her best friend, which is a very touching statement. The next person up was Jeff prenatal, and that is Xana's father. Um, and your heart broke for him. And he said that he had a statement prepared, written out that he was going to read. However, on the plane ride today um, to Idaho, there was a 5-year old. He said about a 5-year old little girl on the plane ride, and that at one point during the plane ride, she started calling out to her daddy, and she was going, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And he said in his head, he immediately jumped back in time to hearing Vanna, when she was 5-year old, in the very same way, calling out for him, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And it just tore him apart. And I feel, he's going to have a little, it's going to be a while for him. He talked about how that night, um, apparently Vanna had not been feeling well, and he called her and asked her, "Do you want me to come over and stay with you tonight?" And she told him, bless her heart, she said no, and she said, "No, you've been drinking, no drinking and driving." And so he, because, that's how mature she was. Her dad, I'm sure he probably wasn't, by any means drunk, probably just had a couple of beers or something. But, she told him, even though she wasn't feeling well, no, no, no drinking and driving. And so he honored his daughter's wishes, like most dads do. Um, and he feels guilt over that because, and he looked right at Kohberger and told him, had I driven, even though I'd been drinking, if I'd have gotten in the car and driven over there, you would have met me on the downstairs couch, and we wouldn't be sitting here doing all this. And he's just riddled with guilt about that. And so we just need to whatever, whether you send prayer, good vibes, whatever you do, just keep him in your thoughts, because he's gonna have a hard time. Next up was Donna's aunt, and she took a little bit of a different vibe with her impact statement, and she told him that she forgives him for what he did, because she has a very strong faith. And in the Bible, Jesus says that we're supposed to forgive. And she said, and honestly, she's not forgiving him for him. She's forgiving him. That's for herself. Um, because when I've got a little bit of experience with that. When you hold just that stuff in, it does you no good. It really doesn't. And so, I mean, yeah, she forgives him, but it's not for his own good. It's for hers. Next up was her uncle, which is was Anna's uncle, and that's her father, Jeff's brother. And he spoke of all of what what Brian's actions have done to his family. And basically, his actions have completely tainted their families and their families' homes. Um, so apparently there's just a lot of things going on there. Now next up is Randy. Now Randy is Xana's stepfather. Um, and Randy, he started out by, just talking about how some of the positives of this thing was that, he now has a new family because, all of these families are bonded in a way that not many families that aren't related by blood can be. And he turned around and he told him, he said, "I love you all." And and then he started talking about, how funny and Xana was, and he spoke of how her little brother Elijah, that he had been away on working, and as a joke, Xana knew when he was going to be home, and so she took her little brother Elijah and dressed him up, would put a dress on him and all this stuff, just as a joke. And they said that she was very much a jokester, but very much loved. Now, uh, at that point though, his demeanor changed, and he turned and he looked Kohberger in the face and basically told him, "You know what, boy, I'm having a real hard time restraining myself because what I really want to do with you is take you out in the woods and show you basically what you what you put my daughter through. I want to show you how that feels." And I mean, he had to restrain himself. He did. He had to restrain himself. And you know what? That's I I understand completely. I understand completely. Next up for Xana was Karen Worthington, which is her mother. Now again, Karen, she chose to, again, she is very strong in her faith, and again, she told him that she forgives him, through the love of Jesus Christ, um, and she said by forgiving him, through her faith, that it has released her from the evil that he brought into their lives. But she made also sure that he did know that going to prison for the rest of your life here on earth isn't the worst thing that he had to worry about. That one day he was going to have to stand before God, and God's wrath is much worse than anything that we can do here on earth. And she reminded him in the end that heaven is real and so is hell. Very, very emotional statement. Now, Ethan Chapin, his his family had already made it clear that they were not going to be doing the victim impact statements. They said that they in no way wanted to share good memories of Ethan with Brian Kohberger. And I can understand that. I mean, because even though, because that's what you're doing. I mean, he's there and you're kind of feeding the ego. And so I think that they had participated on, I believe it was the second documentary. And that's where, they talked about Ethan a lot, was on that second documentary. I can't remember the name of it. So basically, that was the end of the victim impact statements. After that, of course, he called for state's arguments, and of course, the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, got up there and said that he's pled guilty to all five counts of the four counts of murder and one count of burglary with the intent of committing a felony. He has waived appeals for his motions, and all that. Um, and he kind of talked about. He gave us a little glimpse into how all of the plea happened and all that. basically after the defense team sent in the motion that had to do with, alternate perpetrator and, wanting more time because of the media leak and all that. When all those came back denied, the defense approached him for the first time in this case. At no point in time in the last 2.5 years has the defense mentioned anything about a plea deal until that time. They did contact him asking about a plea. They had always, from the get go, stated that he was factually innocent. So he didn't see that was coming. Um, let's see. Then, basically, after that, the prosecution met with either representatives of the families or the families themselves to let them know that that the prosecution had been approached about a plea by the defense, and also told them the plea offer if they, offer it to them, what the plea offer was, which would be him pleading guilty to all 5 counts um, with fixed life, no opportunity at parole, and him waiving his appellate rights. So, even though all the families weren't, all for the plea, they kind of had to look past that, and they decided that the best thing would be to offer the plea, and um, they made sure that they understood that when they offered the plea, there's no bargaining here. Um, you know, all the defense's motions for the past 2.5 years, have been that he was, factually innocent, and they told him this is the deal. No, if we do this, you're waiving your right to appeal. You are waiving. It's going to be fixed life, no possibility of parole. You're not going to be able to come back and argue about any of this. This is done and done. And the defense accepted the offer. Um, they then notified the families of the decisions, and they accepted responsibility for the responsibility of, the feelings of the families that disagreed with the plea. Um, and basically, he said, it's time to close the door and pronounce the sentence. And he asked that the judge sentence Brian Kohberger to count one of burglary, 10 years fixed, count two in the death of Maddie, fixed life, for count three in the death of Kaylee, fixed life, in count four, the death of Xana, fixed life, count five, the death of Ethan, fixed life, and for these two run consecutively. Um, and then, he talked about, focusing forward on, on the lives taken, their families, and the communities, and healing. Because it was very much not just the families. I mean, it was, you want to find out ways to honor the lives that were taken, help the families of the victims. And it very much broke that community as well. He ended his statement of, of what he was asking the judge for the sentencing, and he showed a picture of all 6 roommates, and it's a picture that's been all over the TV, all over the internet, and it's of all 6 of them on the porch of the home that they lived in, that they shared. I think one of them's on one of them's back. That picture, the crime happened in the overnight hours, in the early morning hours of November the 13th, 2022. That picture was taken on November the 12th, 2022. Um, Literally, barely 12 hours later, barely 12 hours later, four of them were gone. And asked him, he said, please do not just sentence him to life in prison. Please sentence him to die in prison. And um, of course, the defense was asked if they had anything else. The defense did not. Kohberger was asked if he wanted to make a statement. He did not have a statement, which is probably all for the best. And Judge Hippler, now it was Judge Hippler's turn. He acknowledged the families for speaking. He acknowledged the counsel on how professional they had been. Um, and, like I said, I'm just going to hit some high points of his stuff, but he outright, called him a faceless coward and, you know, uh, a thief that snuck into the door and, took advantage of four young people who were asleep in their beds. Innocent people. It was said it was an act of evil, immeasurable. Has caused immeasurable pain and loss. Talked about how no parent should ever have to bury a child. These parents, sent their children to college and brought them home in coffins. Um, and that none. Describe talking about the parents themselves and the families. Was saying that no one should ever judge their ways of dealing with that loss because it's a loss so great. They should never be judged for the way that they deal with it. The surviving roommates, he talked about how they were courageous, um, through, having to deal with made up stories. Um, they were made up by the media, having to deal with all the harassment, all of that. Um, And he said that they were survivors, that they were fighters. Most of all, they were witnesses. And they came forward and gave everything that they could. Um, and, you know, he said that they should, as far as, the kids, that they should never be forgotten and should be forever celebrated, along with the, along with the roommates. He spoke about the motive deal, and he said, we don't know why, and um, actually, by continuing to focus on the why gives Kohberger the spotlight, attention, and the power that he craves. And even if he did give some type of work to tell something, I mean, why would we believe him? Um, no reason. There is no rational reason for what he did to begin with. I mean, there's just no reason for that. But yeah, he said, he's claimed for 2.5 years that he was completely innocent, and so why should we believe anything that he says? And basically, the more that we try to figure out why, the more power that we give him. Books, movies, media views, all that. Basically, and this is something that's really close to my heart, he said, what you need to do with Brian Kohberger is use him for prevention study to see how we can figure out, because like I said, there have been signs the whole time. And this, could have been completely completely prevented. And then ended it with that he should be removed from society forever. He then sentenced Brian Kohberger 10 years fixed for the burglary with the maximum fine of $50,000 and the maximum civil penalty to the I'm sorry, that one didn't get a civil penalty. Next one was for Maddie's life, fixed life. maximum fine of $50,000 with the maximum civil um, penalty, which will be paid to the family, of $5,000. Kaylee, fixed, maximum fine of $50,000 with the maximum civil penalty to the family of $5,000. Xana, fixed life with the maximum $50,000 fine and the maximum $5,000 civil penalty to the family. Ethan, fixed, maximum $50,000 fine with the maximum $5,000 civil penalty to be paid to her family. And that all of these are to run consecutive. Now, when we're talking about those, were just that was just the restitution that the judge gave him today. At the beginning of the hearing, the prosecution asked if they could have a little extension on getting together the amounts for the restitution that they were going to ask for, which that restitution includes monies for like funerals, all of the plane airfare that's had to be for all this stuff, motels, food, um, lost wages, counseling. I think a couple of these family members actually had to be hospitalized. So all of that will, within the next 60 days, the prosecution will get all of those numbers together, and that will be added onto the fees that he was given today. Now, here's the thing. Even though Brian Kohberger, with his plea agreement, he waived his appellate rights. What they cannot do, they cannot take away his right to file a notice of appeal. However, Judge Hippler made sure that he understood that he still does have the ability to file for that notice of appeal, but it will violate the plea agreement. And he told him, I strongly suggest that you speak with your attorneys before filing that. And basically, what that means is, if Brian Kohberger uh, files that notice of appeal and violates his plea agreement, that means that the state has the ability to withdraw their plea and to take him to trial, and with the death penalty on the table. So that's not something that he wants to do. Um, but yeah, and he also, in speaking about how he will be, remanded to the Idaho Department of Corrections until, and he did. He said until he dies. Um, so that's just, oh man, it was just it's been an emotional day, an emotional day. Now, after the hearing, there was a presser after the hearing, a formal presser inside the courthouse. However, right after the hearing was over with, they did allow a couple of the families, if they wanted to come speak, they where the media was, they had a podium set up so that they could speak. And Steve Gonzalez, the Gonzalez family was the first family out there, and they did choose to speak to the media. And basically, at that point, Steve said that they were glad to be moving on. Of course, they did wanted death, but he's being put away for life. Um, Now, at this point in time, um, Kaylee's older brother Stephen, he had a statement written that he was going to read in court, but at the last minute, he decided that he wasn't sure if his statement was okay. Some of the things in there would be okay for him to say in the courtroom, so he declined. However, he read that statement to the media, and basically, he really called out the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, and he called into light, many of his cases in the past. A lot of them were death penalty cases, um, where you had charges that were reduced, uh, gave, let's see, where is it at? I thought that I wrote down one of the names. But I didn't. But yeah, talking about how there's a lot, especially death penalties, that got pled out. Um, Basically, gave a lot of examples where the charges were reduced, and um, that's not, to him, he didn't think that that was justice. And basically that he had done no death penalty cases. He is against the death penalty. However, um, one thing that we did find out is that in between the gag order being lifted and how, even though the other documents were sealed, the Gonzalez family was contacted by the lead detectives on this case, and they had a 3-hour meeting. And during that time, they found out the information that they wanted to find out before doing their victim impact statement. And one thing that they did find out was that Kaylee had been stabbed 30 plus times, and that she had been beaten severely by an object. Now, that object has never been found. Um, and so, and they were the only family. Another family spoke, but it was just very brief. But guys, yeah, I just, y'all please go watch these because, like I said, you just can't get the. You just need to watch them. It'll affect you. I promise. All right, guys, I'm gonna jump off. You guys have a great day. Have fun and be safe. And always, always, always know that you're loved. Love you guys. Bye.